Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shante Shante Shante. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada. Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankhayate Giri Yatkripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Paramananda Madhavam. So with Bhagavan's grace and Puja Gurudev's blessings, we completed chapter 3 last 2 weeks ago. Today we're going to see a summary of the entire chapter. So we'll be able to recall what happened in this chapter and how it relates to the previous chapters. So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen. Okay, and all right. There we go. All right. So everybody can see this? Yes? Okay. Wonderful. So we started our Bhagavad Gita actually with Mahabharata. So if you remember, we went through the whole story of Mahabharata. Of course, just the essential parts. Otherwise, it would take too long to cover. And in the Mahabharata, we learned that there was this huge war in Kurukshetra. And so chapter 1, which is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, is all about the yoga of Arjuna's grief. In that when he was in the battlefield, he was not able to face his relatives. So in chapter 1, why is it Arjuna's grief? Because he broke down. The yoga of Arjuna's grief, yoga means that which unites us. So the grief of Arjuna united him with the higher. And he said, his limbs were failing, his mouth is parched, his body was quivering, his mind is whirling. He couldn't stand. And this great warrior Arjuna, who had the Gandiva bow, it slipped from his hand. And so this is how we started chapter 1. And this whole chapter 1 was only the grief of Arjuna and how he behaved in the battlefield. Then we saw chapter 2, which is Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya here means knowledge, the knowledge of the truth. We saw Sankhya Yoga, Brahma Vidya, the yoga of knowledge. Why? Because in chapter 2, Sri Krishna gives Arjuna knowledge. Sri Krishna actually tells Arjuna, get up and fight. When does he do this? Only when Arjuna surrenders to him. So when Arjuna surrenders to Sri Krishna, then Sri Krishna starts to talk. Otherwise, he was just silent. And he tells Arjuna, you are the changeless, eternal Atman, consciousness. And therefore, you should not grieve because you cannot be killed and you do not kill. You are that pure, unattached self. You are indestructible. And therefore, knowing this, Arjuna, don't grieve. And we saw very clearly in the second chapter that we are Atman, we are this water. We are this water that's imperishable, that's untouched. But because of our ignorance, we behave like this ego, the wave. We behave like the wave. Because of our ignorance, we identify with the body, mind, and intellect, and we feel so extremely limited. We feel like we're breaking down. We go through joys and sorrows. So he says, don't grieve, Arjuna. And then after he gives Arjuna the knowledge of the self, he says, Arjuna, you must do your duty. He says, Sukha dukkha same kritva, keeping joy and sorrow the same. Labha labho jaya jayo, gain and loss, victory and defeat. Tato yudhaya yujjasva. Now go ahead and engage in battle. Nevam papam avapsisi, and you won't incur sin. So he says, now engage in battle. And he tells Arjuna, karamanyevadhikaraste. Your right is to work. Your right is in karma. Ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't worry about any of the results. Ma karma phalahetur bhu. Don't think about the motives. Ma te sangostu karmani. And don't be attached to inaction. Don't back down now. You go ahead and fight. And then at the end of the second chapter, which we just heard in Sthita Prajna Lakshana, Bhagavan Krishna, again, he extols the Sthita Prajna. He says, you know, Arjuna, this is what a wise person or a steady person is like, because Arjuna asks that question. And so equipoised, so equanimous, and very detached and very content in the self. And even if one gets this knowledge at the end of their lives, they will realize the truth. So now Arjuna is very confused. At the end of chapter 2, we find Arjuna being confused because he says, wait a second. Bhagavan Krishna is really praising Jnana Yoga or Sankhya Yoga, both the same, the knowledge, the yoga of knowledge, but he's telling me to do karma. So he's praising knowledge, but he's telling me to do action. So Arjuna here is quite confused. And therefore, we start chapter 3. So chapter 3 is the yoga of action or karma yoga, because in this chapter, it's all about how we unite with the higher through action. And this chapter, you know, has 14 different topics. So we will explore those topics. So the first topic is Arjuna's questions. The second topic is the twofold path. Lord Krishna answers Arjuna. Then the third topic, really, which I've put, 3 to 9, Bhagavan Krishna tells Arjuna why he should engage in karma yoga. Why should he do karma yoga? And this is for all of us also. He explains that karma yoga is a means to Sankhya, it's means to knowledge. He says we were created with yajna. We are part of a cosmic cycle. We're not established in knowledge yet. And great people have attained purity through karma yoga. And he says, Arjuna, you are a role model. So what you do, people will follow. And Lord Krishna himself says, I engage in karma. So he gives 7 reasons why one should do karma yoga. And this was sort of Lord Krishna guiding Arjuna. And then Lord Krishna also, in the 10th topic, he gives some advice to Mahatmas that one should not go and tell or give the knowledge of the self to just anybody. We must see where the person is at and accordingly give them that kind of instruction. Because the knowledge of the self is very different from karma yoga. And we will see those differences. Then the next topic, in the topic 11, again, Lord Krishna summarizes the entire Karma Yoga in one beautiful verse. This is the heart of the third chapter. Then in topic 12, he says, what will happen to those who follow it and those who don't follow it? And then topic 13, which was very recent for us, was all about the fire of desire. Arjuna asks that I want to follow this path of Karma Yoga and Dharma, but something is pulling me in the other direction. And so we find out that's called desire. And then topic 14 is how to finally conquer that desire, which is self-knowledge. So in this way, we see chapter 3 with 14 different topics. And that's what we'll explore today. So now, first let's see, and so how I've done it is in the parentheses, the verses. So if you want to follow with me with the verses, you can. Otherwise, I'm happy also to share this with you. But so our thought flow is very clear of what's happening. So Arjuna is confused. We said, Lord Krishna, you said Jnana Yoga is superior. So here, Lord Krishna has no doubt. Definitely, somebody who's established in the self, that is the highest thing that anybody can pursue. Something might look more glamorous. Something like might look more like, wow, admirable and amazing. Something might look so incredibly sattvic. But in our Vedanta, the highest is the person who's established in knowledge. That is the highest. It's not sattva, it's one who's gone beyond sattva. And in this, Lord Krishna has no doubt. He doesn't tell Arjuna it's not superior, it is superior. And ultimately, we have to end up in this path, because this path is that which removes ignorance. So Arjuna's question is, you said Jnana Yoga is superior, but you're telling me to perform Karma Yoga. What is this? Because all of us want to think that we're in a higher state, right? If somebody tells us this is the best, then we will want to go for the best. We're not going to want to go for anything less. And so here he misses an important point. He feels like Lord Krishna is speaking about two things. But Lord Krishna clearly, he removes the doubts of Arjuna. He says, Arjuna, it's a twofold path. I'm not telling you two things. It's a twofold path. Karma Yoga is the means and Sankhya Yoga is the goal. So the means is to purify oneself through action, and the goal is to abide or be established in the self. So one is the means, one is the goal. I'm not really, giving you two completely different things. One is the means and one is the goal. And therefore, go to Jnana Yoga through Karma Yoga. Go to Jnana Yoga through Karma Yoga, because right now, Arjuna, for many of us, the mind isn't ready. And so now he gives 7 reasons why we should do Karma Yoga. So the first reason is Karma Yoga is a means to Sankhya Yoga. So how this topic unfolds is Arjuna somehow feels that not acting, inaction, not acting is the way to go. That naishkarmya, he heard this term naishkarmya. And so he felt that maybe if I don't act, if I become actionless, that's the way to go. So Bhagavan Krishna removes this right away. He says naishkarmya, though it means, without karma, it doesn't mean inaction. What it means is no doership. And that having no doership can only happen when ignorance is removed. Because with ignorance, we feel we're the doer and the enjoyer. So naishkarmya means having no doership. And somebody could be so dynamic in the world, and that person could be naishkarmya, established in naishkarmya, like our own Puja Gurudev. Incredibly dynamic, but inside so still. And he says to Arjuna, nobody can remain without action. So don't just freeze and not do anything. You have to move. You have to do something. Even sitting is an action. Walking is an action. Lying down is an action. So nobody can remain without action. We have to act. And even for the yatra of our sharira, even for the maintenance of our body, we have to act. So please act. And don't be a mithyachara. So Arjuna, wanted to go and give up this battle. And he wanted to go and beg for bhiksha and sit quietly. But do you think that he would really sit quietly? Lord Krishna says these are mithyacharas, they're hypocrites, wherein they feel like they are ready now for the path of meditation. But when they sit down, all they're thinking about is action. So he says, don't be a mithyachara. Now, here we have to think very clearly, right? When we do our daily sadhana and we try to meditate, that is completely fine. What Lord Krishna is saying here is don't denounce action. Don't denounce all your duties and actions and just pretend that you can sit in solitude all the while, because you can't. So don't be that kind of person. It would do us better if we have a restless mind to engage in karma yoga and also spend time with our sadhana, also start training our minds to be quiet. And so he says, you take your action and perform it as an offering to Bhagavan, as yajna, yajnarthat. Offer it to God. Because when you offer it to God, then you become purified from the actions. But those who don't offer it to a greater altar or greater cause, they become bound by those very actions. So here is his first reasoning to Arjuna. Then he tells Arjuna, not only that, but in verses 10 to 13, he says, we were created with 5 yajnas. Not Lord Krishna was created because he's the creator, but we were created with 5 yajnas. And what are they? The Deva yajna, the yajna to the God, yajna to the rishis, yajna to our ancestors, and yajna to our community and to nature. So what is his thinking here? He says that everybody has given so much to us. God has given us such a wonderful environment, a world, a place where we can unfold this body, this mind, this intellect, this talent, these resources. Everything comes from God. Our rishis have given us our scriptures. They've preserved it. They've explained it. Not only that, but they've lived it. That's the most important. They've lived it, and they've given us a live example. Our parents, our ancestors, they left us with our language, our culture, our music, all of those wonderful things which really enrich and bring beauty to our lives. And definitely our community, how much they sacrifice for us. It could be anybody from the security, the police, the doctors, the people in the grocery, in the sanitation department. Everyone works in this spirit of yajna to support us. And of course, nature, just being in nature is so incredibly healing. And our trees provide us with so much oxygen. The sun provides us with so much energy. And so the idea is we're created with all of this, with so many beings giving to us. And therefore, it's our duty to give back. We're created with the 5 yajnas. Therefore, we must give back to the 5 yajnas. And when we nourish each other, then we reach Shreya, then we attain good, attain that which is beneficial to all. So therefore, we must engage in karma yoga. And he goes on to say that, there are people who just take without giving anything. because they feel like it's not their responsibility to contribute to society. They feel like they've earned their own money, and so why should they give? It was their own hard work. But really, who sustained us throughout that hard work? Who was there for us? Who took care of us? It's all of these people only. And so there are some people who feel like they shouldn't give back. They just take and take and take without giving back. And Bhagavan Krishna says they are stena. They're like a thief. And they only cook for themselves and they eat sin. So the idea of our culture is that whatever we get, we give it back to these 5 yajnas and keep whatever is required for our maintenance. Not that we hoard. So selfishness, selfish desire is a great sin. It leads us to so many negativities, which we will see later on. So he says, then engage in karma yoga. Don't be this person who hoards. There's one nice subhashita that says, some people, they don't give money because they feel like they're going to, what's going to happen to them when they grow old. But some people give money because they feel like what's going to happen when we grow old. We might not have any more money to give, so let's give right now. So the truth is, even how much money and security we keep, it can go away. Wealth is never ever secure. The only secure thing is God. And therefore hang on to God, because wealth, health, everything will come and it will go without even us being warned about it. So there's no need for us to hold back. Then he continues to say, we must perform karma yoga because we are part of a cosmic cycle. We're not an individual being. We're all interdependent on each other. And this is the cosmic chain that we see. From Bhagavan comes the Veda, the knowledge. Knowledge is his very breath. Yasya nishvasitam Veda. His knowledge is his very breath. And from that Veda, we learn what actions we should do, particularly our swadharma. What is the correct action for our stage in life, for our position in life, for our temperament? And when we perform these actions as yajna, the spirit of sacrifice, meaning dedicated to something higher and accepting whatever we get as prasad, when we do that, we become prosperous. When we work as a team for something so much bigger than ourselves, we become prosperous. And not one person becomes prosperous, everyone around us becomes prosperous, because rain cannot just fall on one person's head. Rain falls on everybody. And therefore prosperity comes to everyone, and that brings about abundance or food, profit. And when there is food, there is nourishment, there is life. And when there is life, that life then dedicates themselves, or hopefully dedicates themselves, to God. So we are all part of this cosmic chain. And so therefore he says, don't hinder this. Help it. If we hinder it, if we stop, let's say, the spirit of yajna, if we stop this, if we just do everything for our own selves, we will not become a prosperous society. We will not. And so therefore, the main key is yajna. And in fact, Bhagavan Krishna says, if you want to feel God, if you want to see God here and now, you see God in yajna. Yajna pratishtita. Bhagavan is present in yajna. Whenever people come together for a greater cause, which is above and beyond themselves, how that unfolds, nobody can explain. It's only understood as the divine hand. So whenever we want to feel God, we engage in this kind of work, which is ultimately worship. So then the next reason he gives is topic number 6, we're not established in that knowledge. Somebody might ask, is there anyone who's exempt from this cosmic chain? And Lord Krishna says, yes. The Atma Ratihi, Atma Santushtaha, all of them, those who revel in the self, satisfied in the self, content in the self, they are exempt from this cycle. They're exempt from this cycle. Why? Tasya karyam na vidyate. They don't need anything. They don't need anything. They don't see the need to attain anything. We only do something because we want to get something. We perform action because we want to gain something. But for that one who's gained or who's realized the self, what else will they want? And so those who have realized the self, there's nothing more to be done. There's nothing more that they want. And they are exempt from this cosmic chain. So if we see a Mahatma sitting down in solitude, don't say to that Mahatma, you must be in the cosmic chain. If that Mahatma is truly, truly in solitude, reveling in themselves, then they don't need to engage in all of this. It's only those of us who are not established in the knowledge, we need to be part of this chain. So therefore, engage in Karma Yoga. And then Lord Krishna goes on to say, you know, Arjuna, great people have attained purity through Karma Yoga. So Janaka, he attained purity through it. So many wonderful people, they have really progressed on this path of spirituality through this Karma Yoga. So you also do the same thing. You also do the same thing. And then he says further, Arjuna, you are a special case because you are a Shreshta. Shreshta means you're in a position where everybody's looking up to you. He holds that position in society where everyone's always watching what's Arjuna doing. And what Arjuna does, people tend to follow. What great people do, others follow. And that becomes the law, that becomes the pramana. So Bhagavan Krishna says, everybody's looking at you. So if you back out of the war, just think, people will be cowards and not fight. If you say that you're going to take sannyas, people will walk out of their dharma. Is that really the right thing to do when faced with such an injustice? So you have to do what's right. You are in that position. And then, and Arjuna, Lord Krishna says, I'll give you an example. Me. And this is what's so great about Lord Krishna is because he is the very example which he speaks about. He says, I don't need anything. I don't want anything from this world. He's clearly, of course, he's the epitome of truth, but yet Bhagavan Krishna becomes a charioteer for Arjuna. Just see, he says, I don't need to do anything, but I still do. So some Mahatmas, because they're in such a position in society where they are playing a specific role, they engage in action, even if they don't need to, because they are in that particular role. And Sri Krishna says, if I leave everything, then what will happen? Everybody will leave everything. So therefore, I have to do it. And here we saw Bhagavan Krishna's schedule, how he wakes up at Brahma Murta, he sits down, he meditates, he does his Sandhya Vandana, and he lives a very dutiful life. So then he says, yes, so we saw this. Now he gives an advice to Mahatmas. He says, those who are in such positions that are Shreshta, where they are guiding society, those who are in solitary caves and everything, they are free, completely free. But he says, those who are guiding society, they should work with as much zeal, if not more, than the Ajnanis. The wise should work with as much zeal as the otherwise, but for the welfare of the world and without detachment. And further, he says, don't unsettle the minds of those who aren't ready for knowledge. So these are very, very important instructions. So one is how we tend to feel sometimes that we can give this Atma Jnana to people around us. Let's say somebody asks us for advice, somebody says something to us, and we feel like maybe we can say, you are the Atman, you are that pure self, which is true. It is very true. But we have to see where that person stands. At that person's juncture, that might not be the best thing to give them. What might be the best thing is engage in karma yoga, engage in this selfless, dedicated work. And slowly, slowly, that person will unfold and come to themselves inquire about Jnana Yoga. Gurudev gives the beautiful example, which I shared with you, that if everybody's going in the wrong direction, we cannot just help them and say you're wrong. We actually have to go in that direction with them and then go in front and slowly turn them without them even knowing that they're being turned. That's the beauty of the great teacher, to lead them in front and turn them without them even knowing. And then before you know it, they're ending up in Jnana Yoga without them even realizing it. And so this is the advice he gives to all Mahatmas. We were talking about yajna and how it rains, right? So now it's raining because of the yajna, of this yajna. So now here, we also saw this difference between how Ajnani and Jnani perform action. You don't think that just because somebody's performing action, they're ignorant or they are wise. It's really their inner attitude. So with the one who is ignorant, there's an attachment there, but the jnani is ever detached. For Ajnani, it's about a selfish affair. They want some money, name, fame, something they want. For jnani, it's really for the welfare of the world because they don't want anything. Here, there's a strong doership. And of course, with the jnani, there is no doership. And the Ajnani, strong enjoyership. And that's why there's so much insistence that I must get this result. I must have this result in a particular way. But here, there's no enjoyership. Here, there's so much control. Here, there's so much surrender. This is very, very Rajasika. For Jnani, the action itself is Sattvika, but they're beyond the gunas. This has a lot of passion. This is compassion with this passion. And in the work, the Ajnani is constantly questioning, did I get recognized? Did people see me? Did they call out my name? Did I shine? And then Jnani says, did I lose myself in time? Did I get lost in God in the process? And this is the difference between the two. So both could be doing the same action. But what's inside of them? There's a world of difference. Well, actually, for the jnani, there is no world. And that's the difference. And so he says, the attitude is quite different. Ajnanis think, these are very, very important verses, verses 25 to 29. The Ajnanis think that they are the doer and enjoyer, but the Jnanis know that it's the gunas playing with the gunas. I am that changeless awareness. I am the witness, and it's just the gunas playing with the gunas. So let it do what it has to do. And after giving all of these reasons, 7 reasons, he tells Arjuna, this is the summary of Karma Yoga. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya dhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasta vigatajvaraha. The most important term here is adhyatma chetasa. It's with our attitude that we are the servant of God, or we belong to God, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya. Offer all of the actions unto God. Offer everything unto God. Dedicate it to a higher altar. And completely let go. Nirashihi. Nirashihi, no hope. Turn that hope, we said, into faith. Now that I hope this happens, and I hope that happens, and I hope I get this result. Again, that means we're interfering with a greater divine plan. Just have faith. Thy will be done. Let it go. Nirmamaha, free from mineness and I-ness. So let it be whatever God wants. Let it be about the greater vision. Not about me, but let it be about we. Vigatajwaraha, free from mental fever. So free from that pressure. Turn that pressure into poise. We feel so much pressure when there's doership, because we feel we have to perform a certain way, we have to act a certain way, be a certain way. But surrender also that. Let God work through us and let there be poise. And in this way, having done all of that, yudhyasva, Bhagavan Krishna tells Arjuna, fight. Fight here means for us, do our dharma. And on that regard, don't compromise. Don't compromise on dharma. Don't let attachment cloud our dharma. So very beautifully, he gives this teaching to Arjuna. Then what does he say? He says, okay, now I'll talk to you about those who follow and don't follow the teaching. So he says, those who have faith, those who don't see any fault in this teaching, they are purified and eventually they are freed, because their mind becomes purified and slowly they make their way to Jnana Yoga and they realize that they are that ever liberated Atman. But those who don't follow any method of purifying the mind need not necessarily be only Karma Yoga. In this chapter, we are talking about Karma Yoga, so that's the direct reference. But in a general term, we can understand that those who do not follow any purification method for the mind, they will go through suffering because they'll have to come back birth after birth after birth. Then Arjuna asks, then why don't people follow? If your teaching is so beautiful, pristine, clear, why don't people follow? Lord Krishna says, because people are guided by their prakriti. Prakriti here meaning their nature, their natural vasanas. They are guided by that. They're guided by their vasanas. And so it becomes a little challenging for them to follow the path of dharma. So then Arjuna asks, then do we have free will? Or do we just act? Are we just carried away by our vasanas? And Lord Krishna says, no, we do have free will. What we need to do is keep raga and dvesha, likes and dislikes, under our sway. So we know that we have certain vasanas, and those vasanas which are good, let them unfold. Let them unfold as they need to. But those that are negative or taking us away from our duty, then we have to control them. We cannot come under their sway. So that's where the self-effort lies. We have to be careful not to come under the sway of raga dvesha. Dharma means do what is right, even if it's what I don't like. We have to do what's right. And in everything, we have to do it the ideal way that it must be done. And on this, there should be no compromise. And so he says, find your, well, Arjuna already knows his Swadharma, but to us, live our Swadharma. And our Swadharma is what? Our Swadharma is our own field of evolution. In what way can we best evolve in this very life? Can we evolve as a person who's nurturing, a guide? Or can we evolve as somebody who's an entrepreneur? Or can we evolve as somebody who's just a wanderer, right? So what is the best way we can evolve? What is our field of evolution? When we match our innate tendencies with the capacity to evolve and serve others, that match is called Swadhyaya. So he says, live your Swadhyaya. It's not a career, it's not a hobby, it's not a talent, it's a match between our tendency and our field of evolution. And this Swadharma can change. Eventually, we will come to realize that our Swadharma is really to realize the self. We will come to that. And when we come to that, then we will rest on that Atman. That is what we have to do. Ultimately, that's what we have to do. But because the vasanas are so strong, we have to go through these paths of expressing our Swadharma in a selfless way, of course. So then, Arjuna says, gosh, Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna, I'm trying, but somehow I feel like even if I want to follow my Swadharma, I know my Swadharma is Kshatriya, something is pulling me back. What is that? And so the next topic is the fire of desire. Something pulls him back from doing his dharma, and that's called desire. And Arjuna says, even if I don't want to, it's pulling me back. But as we explored, actually there is a want to. There's a conflict between the intellect and the mind. Maybe the intellectual portion doesn't want to do it, but the mind is tempted to do it. And so that force that pulls us is called desire. Desire is nothing but that very same raga, or that like, which we saw in a more gross avatar is desire. That like becomes desire. And that dislike or dvesha becomes anger. So he says, kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhavaha. And this is very, very difficult to conquer. This is no easy brainer, because the more we engage in desire, the more it flares up. It flares up. And he gave beautiful examples. He says, like smoke covers fire, like dust covers a mirror, like a womb covers a fetus, desire covers our knowledge. And we saw these terms in various ways. And I'll just explore maybe one of them, where we have a light desire. We have a light desire. It's like smoke covering fire. So you can kind of, a little bit, you blow and you can see the fire. So a little bit of vichara, a little bit of thinking, and the desire can actually just go. This is smoke covering a fire. When our desires are that light, that is great. It's easy. It's easy enough to transcend them. But then there are some desires like dust covering a mirror. Those desires, we really have to work on them. Like dust in a mirror, you can't even see your shape. You have to really clean it, right? Really, really clean it. And so these desires, a lot of vichara, a lot of thinking, a lot of understanding why we have these desires. That's the only way to go through them, to transcend them. Then there are some desires like a womb covers a fetus. Now those desires are so incredibly strong in us that the only way for us to go through that desire is to give birth to it, right? The fetus has to come out of the womb. The desire has to express. We cannot anymore be in a phase where we can inquire and question it and think about it. We can't do that anymore when it's very strong. When it's very strong, it just has to express. It just has to express, because we have lost control at that point. We've let that desire get so strong, it just has to express. And so we have to go through that whole thing of that desire. So what is the lesson for us in this is that think through my desire. If there is a desire in my mind, right away, nip it in the bud. Why is that desire coming? Why is that desire coming? Why am I feeling this way? And what is the best way to nip that desire in the bud or root it out? Bhagavan Krishna says, self-knowledge is the best way, because desires are in the senses, they're in the mind and in the intellect. When we see something, when we hear something, automatically we get so attracted to it, leaves an impression. Even if we don't see, we're thinking of something, we're remembering something, and it leaves a deep impression in the mind. And then the intellect starts to feel, I can get joy from that. So he says, look, this is the level of superiority. The sense organs are superior to the body, but superior to the sense organs is the mind. And superior to the mind is the intellect. But superior to that intellect is the self. So if we really want to get rid of this desire, which pushes us out into action for completion, instead of action out of completion, if we want to get rid of this desire, know the self. That's the only way. Realize who you are, Arjuna. Realize that you are Atman, that changeless, pure awareness, that self which is already complete, that self in which all fulfillment lies. The truth is you are what you seek, and you are already that right now. So revel in that, stay in that, and be that. And this was Bhagavan Sri Krishna's message. And so if we want to get the crux, just tell me chapter 3 in 3 points. Okay. Karma Yoga purifies the mind and it prepares us for Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga is the means and abidance in the self is the goal. This is how they're related. And only with abidance in the self, only with that, can desires be destroyed, can desires be removed. And thus, one can remain ever content in the self. Atmaratihi, atmatushtaha, atmatriptaha. And this is Bhagavan Krishna's beautiful message of chapter 3. Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do for the remaining time, I had no idea what time was happening because I had to share screen. Let's read through the verses of chapter 3. So I want you to follow with me. We will read all verses. And as we read the verses, you can really feel the teaching. So if you feel easier to connect reading the translation, you can do that. If you want to chant with me in Sanskrit, you can do that. But I just want everyone to connect to the verses. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha Atha Tritiyodhyayaha Karma Yogaha Arjuna Uvacha Jayasi Chet Karmanaste Mata Buddhir Janardana Tatkim Karmani Ghore Mam Niyojayasi Keshava Vyamishreneva Vakyena Buddhim Bohayasiva me Tadekam Vada Nishchitya Yena Shreyohamapnuyam Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Dvividha Nishta Pura Prokta Mayanagha Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam Na Karmanam Anarambhat Naishkarmyam Purushoshnute Na cha Sanyasanadeva Siddhim Samadhigacchati Nahi Kaschit Kshanamapi Jatu Tishtatya Karma Krita Karyate Hyavashah Karma Sarva Prakriti Jairgunehi Karmendriyani Samyamya या आस्ते मनसा स्मरन् इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते यस्त्वेन्द्रियाणि मनसा नियम्यारभते अर्जुन कर्मेन्द्रियैः कर्मयोगम् असक्तः स विशिष्यते नियतं कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्म ज्यायो ह्यकर्मणः शरीरयात्रापि च ते न प्रसिद्ध्येत कर्मणः यज्ञार्थात् कर्मणोऽन्यत्र लोकोऽयं कर्म बन्धनः तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्तसङ्गः समाचर सह यज्ञाः प्रजा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः अनेन प्रसविष्यद्वम् एष वोस्त्विष्टकामधुक् देवान् भावयतानेन ते देवा भावयन्तु वः परस्परं भावयन्तः श्रेयः परमवाप्स्यथ इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवाः दास्यन्ते यज्ञभाविताः तैर्दत्तानप्रदायैभ्यः यो भुङ्क्तेस्तेन एव सः यज्ञशिष्टाशिनः सन्तः मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषैः भुञ्जते ते त्वघं पापाः ये पच्यन्त्यात्मकारणात् अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्यादन्नसम्भवः यज्ञात् भवति पर्जन्यः यज्ञः कर्म समुद्भवः कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्माक्षरसमुद्भवं तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम् एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्तयति हयः अघायुरिन्द्रियारामः भोगं पार्थः स जीवते यस्त्वात्मरतिरेव स्यात् आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टः तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थः नाकृतेनेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदर्थव्यपाश्रयः तस्मादसक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो ह्याचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पूरुषः कर्मेणेव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि यद्यदाचरति श्रेष्ठः तत्तदेवेतरो जनः स यत्प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तद् अनुवर्तते न मे पार्थास्ति कर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किञ्चन नानवाप्तमवाप्तव्यं वर्त एव च कर्मणि यदि ह्यहं न वर्तेयं जातु कर्मण्यतन्द्रितः मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः उत्सीदेयुरिमे लोकाः न कुर्यां कर्म चेदहं संकरस्य च कर्ता स्याम् उपहन्यामि मा प्रजाः सक्ताः कर्मण्य विद्वांसः यथा कुर्वन्ति भारत कुर्याद् विद्वांस्तथा सक्तः चिकीर्षुर्लोकसङ्ग्रहम् न बुद्धिभेदं जनयेत् अज्ञानां कर्मसङ्गिनां जोषयेत् सर्वकर्माणि विद्वान् युक्तः समाचरन् प्रकृतेः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहङ्कारविमूढात्मा कर्ताहमिति मन्यते तत्त्ववित्तु महाबाहो गुणकर्मविभागयोः गुणागुणेषु वर्तन्ते इति मत्वा न सज्जते प्रकृतेर्गुणसम्मूढाः सज्जन्ते गुणकर्मसु तान् कृत्स्नविदो मन्दान् कृत्स्नविन्न विचालयेत् मयि सर्वाणि कर्माणि सन्न्यस्याध्यात्मचेतसा निराशीर्निर्ममो भूत्वा युध्यस्व विगतज्वरः ये मे मतमिदं नित्यम् अनुतिष्ठन्ति मानवाः श्रद्धावन्तोऽनुसूयन्तः मुच्यन्ते तेऽपि कर्मभिः ये त्वेतदभ्यसूयन्तः नानुतिष्ठन्ति मे मतम् सर्वज्ञानविमूढांस्तान् विद्धि नष्टान् चेतसः सदृशं चेष्टते स्वस्याः प्रकृतेर्ज्ञानवानपि प्रकृतिं यान्ति भूतानि विग्रहः किं करिष्यति इन्द्रियस्येन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्नवशमागच्छेत् तौ ह्यस्य परिपन्थिनौ श्रेयान् स्वधर्मो विगुणः परधर्मात् स्वनुष्ठितात् स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेयः परधर्मो भयावहः अर्जुन उवाच अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अनिच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय फलादिव नियोजितः श्रीभगवानुवाच काम एष क्रोध एषः रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा विध्येनमिह वैरिणम् धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निः यथादर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भः तथा तेनेदमावृतम् आवृतं ज्ञानमेतेन ज्ञानिनो नित्यवैरिणा कामरूपेण कौन्तेय दुष्पूरेणानलेन च इन्द्रियाणि मनो बुद्धिः अस्याधिष्ठानमुच्यते एतैर्विमोहयत्येषः ज्ञानमावृत्य देहिनम् तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहिह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम् इन्द्रियाणि पराण्याहुः इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः बुद्धेः परतस्तु सः यो बुद्धेः परतस्तु सः एवं बुद्धेः परं बुद्ध्वा संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम् ॐ तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मयोगो नाम तृतीयोऽध्यायः। ॐ तत्सत्। हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।